17 Celsius. The wind light though, and rain mostly over central and western parts will turn more patchy. Then apart from an odd shower, tonight stays largely dry with a few clear intervals, but generally a good deal of cloud. Slightly milder than last night with lows around 10 to 12 degrees.
Call us on 03030 80 55 55. Text 81771 or email the programme talk.back@bbc.co.uk.
Welcome back. It's Mark Simpson today in the talkback chair. And I'm going to have to be very careful with our next discussion because we're going to talk about broadcasters and their accents, their diction, and whether it's important or not that people like me pronounce every word correctly. Or is there really a correct way to say a word? Is the important thing not simply that people understand what we're trying to say? Well, as you maybe heard last week, one of the BBC's presenters at the Olympics, Alex Scott, was criticised by a former member of the House of Lords for dropping her G's at the end of some words. Well, Alex Scott responded on Twitter at the weekend saying she was proud to be from a working class family in East London. And yesterday, on air, she made a subtle reference to it all.
So far we've been running, riding, shooting, scoring, swimming and putting, but we've still got a lot of gold to still uncover. Here's Paddy.
Ouch, right back at you. The man who criticised her was Lord Digby-Jones. He defended himself earlier in an interview with Stephen Nolan on The Nolan Show.
It's not a class thing either. I mean, I was a bit disappointed in Alex when she came back to me on Twitter. She said, I'm a working class girl, I'm proud of it, my words, but that's what she was saying. And it's got nothing to do with class at all. I mean, Preeti Patel, the Home Secretary, does it. Beth Rigby on Sky News does it. And it's not about class, it's not about region. It is poor, indeed bad, elocution, and it's murdering the English language.
Murdering the English language. Really? Let us know what you think. Send us a text. You should know the number by now, but I'll give it to you again. 81771. Just type in that into your smartphone or even your ordinary phone, 81771, and send us a message. Let us know what you think. Or if you want to come on air and join the conversation, our telephone number is 03030 80 55 55. We're going to talk in a moment to Aoife Moore, who's political correspondent for the Irish Examiner. She constantly gets abuse on social media for her Derry accent. Tax specialist Felicity Huston, she says she finds there's a bit of prejudice against her for being well spoken. But first, let's talk to Dr. Sadie Ryan, research associate in linguistics at Manchester Met. Dr. Ryan, is there an actual proper way to say a word or not? I'm thinking about dropping the G's here.
So as an academic, it is an absolute pleasure to be able to give a very straight answer for once and to say that no, linguistically speaking, there's absolutely no correct way of saying a word like running and no incorrect way. We have variation to do with region and class and race and different aspects of our identities. So I would a lot of the time say running, like Alex Scott. And some would call that dropping my G's. The Queen will say something like farmer instead of farmer, so she drops her R's. But somehow we don't see those as the same thing. We don't ever say that the Queen is being lazy or sloppy in the way that she speaks.
But if there's no right or wrong way, is it not just anarchy then?
I wouldn't say it's anarchy. I'd say it's diversity and variation. As long as we can understand each other, right? So, I mean, if I pronounce the word running like scroobajup, then people wouldn't understand me. So within a certain, there's a certain space in which we can understand each other, right? But people usually are able to make themselves understood. We actually do a great job communicating with each other, despite the fact that there are differences in the way that we say things. And the problems start, I think, when people start having a go at each other and talking about correct speech and incorrect elocution. Linguistically speaking, there's absolutely no such thing. It's a fiction that's built around maintaining power for certain groups of people and encouraging other people to stay quiet, basically.
What do you mean by maintaining power?
Well, I think we all recognise that there are certain ways of speaking that get consistently held up, put on a pedestal and treated as being superior and as being at the top of some kind of hierarchy. I'm thinking mostly of what we would call the Queen's English, right? But linguistically speaking, that's not a better way of speaking. It's just that we've had it on this pedestal for so long. And we've had it there because it's the way of speaking that we associate with the most powerful groups in society, with rich white people. And we've had it on that pedestal for so long, I think, that we can't see the pedestal anymore. And we often end up just imagining that it's naturally better rather than just having been socially elevated for so long.
What do you mean? I've often wondered this, and I did many years ago did English A level. Now that's telling you how long ago it was. I think it's more than 3 decades ago. I was always confused by this phrase, the Queen's English. Is that written down? Is it a textbook somewhere?
So yeah, I mean, it's a complicated idea. I'm using the term the Queen's English, but there are lots of different terms that get used. Some people call it standard English. Some people would say received pronunciation. So there's lots of different terms for it. I mean, I think that we all have an idea in our head of, speaking posh, basically, right? That's basically what I mean. And I think we can all imagine it, even if we have slightly different ideas sometimes, maybe.
Felicity Huston, have you been accused of speaking posh?
Well, I've certainly been accused of being English. I mean, that's what tends to happen to me all the time. And, you know, it is amazing, about the prejudice and the antipathy that I experience and the difficulties I have in communicating with people because they have decided I am English. And it is really quite an issue. Now, none of us are particularly responsible for how we speak unless we've gone off and made a massive effort. This is how I speak, yet I get unpleasantness, exclusion, all sorts of things here in Northern Ireland because of the way I speak. So it's not just those who are perceived as having stronger regional accents. It's all sorts of discomfort people obviously feel when they hear a voice and an accent they're not really used to.
What do you think of what happened to Alex Scott?
Well, I have to say that's one of the, we celebrate different accents, but I think there are some that are less attractive than others, and her Essex accent is one that I don't, or East London or whatever we're going to describe it, is one that I don't particularly like, and therefore I could see how maybe for some people as well it jars a bit. Do you remember Tony Blair was much mocked back when he was Prime Minister for developing a habit of dropping his G's, and I would love actually Alistair Campbell to have explained, was it his idea that Tony should start talking like that? But it was his attempt for the old cool Britannia, and down with the youth stuff. It didn't really work. There are accents, though, say, that seem to annoy people. My mum is originally from Liverpool, and I don't think she or anybody else would say that that's an accent any of us are particularly keen on. But it's just sort of the way people see it, or hear it, I should say.
Let's bring in Aoife Moore, political correspondent for the Irish Examiner. Very difficult on radio because we're all going to be listening to your accent now, Aoife. So please don't be self-conscious. But you have had a bit of stick in the past, is that right?
Aye, every time I open my mouth on a public broadcast, I will receive an email or, a tweet on social media making a comment about the way I talk, whether it's the grammar that I use. I've been on TV, and even before the TV show was over, the TV show was getting tweets saying, if you're going to have that girl on the TV, can you give her subtitles? I was once on and I was talking about someone else, and instead of saying Paul and I said me and Paul, which some man was so up in arms about, he felt the need to sit down and write me a very long email about how I shouldn't be allowed on the radio because of the way I talk. He was very disappointed that the state broadcaster in Dublin, RTE, would even have me on if that's the way I was going to talk. But to be honest, even when I started doing radio, I always knew this was going to happen because I went to the same school as Nadine Coy, who was in Girls Aloud. Mm-hmm. And I remember non-stop grief that Nadine got about the way she talked, sometimes to her face on TV shows. People would, flag her off and repeat her words back to her or whatever. So dairy people, I think anybody with a regional accent in the north especially will know that you're going to get some of it. All of us have been on holidays, all of us have lived away, and you've had some narky comment about your accent. So you do kind of expect it. Now, it used to bother me at the start when I was starting out in journalism, but now I think it would be more embarrassing if I went out of my way to change my accent.
Am I right in thinking that Derry Girls was subtitled when it went on to Netflix, was it?
It was. I had heard that as well. I didn't believe it at the start. but it was
Well-
it was subtitled. And I mean, the other thing about it is only 2 of the Derry girls were actually from Derry. But I thought the accents as a rule were grand. Derry people are very critical when other people try and do Derry accents, but I actually thought they were grand. But obviously I would understand it more than English people would.
Well, I suppose that's the point, that, you know, however protective we are of our accent, we maybe need to recognise, all of us, that in other parts of the world we may be difficult to understand, just as maybe if we went to the southern states of America, people speaking our own language, we might struggle to understand them. So I suppose the question is, do you accept that if it's getting in the way of understanding rather than just a personal preference, it's fair enough for people to complain about somebody's accent?
I don't think it's ever okay to complain about somebody's accent, because the thing with Alex on Saturday with the man who was in the House of Lords, he could understand her. He knew what swimming and running and fencing meant. So his issue wasn't that he couldn't understand her. He just didn't like the way she talked. And what people are saying when I'm on the radio, if it's not me or whoever it is, it has a particular accent, what they're saying is they don't think that people like you should be on TV or radio, because the people who hear me on the TV and radio and can understand me. They just don't think people like me should be there. And that's what I took away from it.
Well, let's see what people think today on Talkback. Send us a text on 81771 or call in yourself. Let us hear your accent on 03030 80 55 55. And Aoife, one last thing for you. I mean, has this died down over the years, or do you think the whole spotlight that's been brought in onto it over Alex Scott may mean you're going to get even more comments today?
Has it died down? No, I would say I get the same regular amount of social media posts and emails as I always did. It bothers me a lot less. I mean, my first ever radio interview was with Marion Finucane on RTE. I was covering the riots in Derry, and I got a very condescending email from a man while I was on the radio, and it bugged me all day. But now I think, God must be very good to you if you have time in your day to sit down and write emails to people you don't know about the way they talk.
And Felicity Huston, it's interesting, anecdotally, I'm hearing that a lot of the comments seem to be men criticising women, as is in the case with Lord Digby and Alex Scott. Aoife has name-checked some men. Is it generally men that have criticised your accent?
Well, it's certainly men who tend to be rather rude, yes, absolutely. I mean, I don't get too much on social media, but then I'm not particularly out there on it anyway. But I do see comments about my what people perceive as posh accent. I think it's just they'd like women to be quiet, please. Whatever way they speak, the best thing is if a woman doesn't speak at all, then they can't be upset by her. So I think there is a bit of that misogynistic stuff. But I mean, we do comment on other accents and so on. I mean, I was thinking years ago about a show called The Boys from the Black Stuff, which was the first time we ever really heard
that was a Geordie accent.
The Geordie accent, you know, and it was a bit of a revelation to us all, and it was quite good. But I'm sure nowadays they might actually put on subtitles, because it could be quite a challenge. I mean, one of the glories of our language is the dialect that we all use here in Northern Ireland, but all over the UK. You know, I mean, I'm sure most countries have it, and it is one of the great things that makes our language and makes it very interesting. So it would be terrible if we all started to speak, actually, as the BBC wanted us to, didn't they? Back in they're certainly their broadcasters in the 30s. RP comes from the BBC, and how you lot were all supposed to speak when you came on and broadcast, so that the rest of us could understand it.
It's very different now, isn't it, Dr. Sadie Ryan? Where do you think the change came? I don't know if you've looked at the history, but when did the change come when regional accents or different nations within the UK seem to be more acceptable?
I don't know if we've really come that far. I mean, things certainly have changed, and I think a lot of it is to do with changes, for example, within the BBC, with more kind of regional broadcasting and more of a range of accents within regional broadcasting. But I think that sometimes we might think we've come a bit further than we have. Like, I think accent prejudice and inequality really still does exist in a big way. And yeah, I mean, I hope that we're moving in the right direction, but to be honest, I feel like we're moving there a lot slower than we could be.
And Dr. Rand, I don't know if you can give us some academic opinion on this. Somebody says, this is Johnny and Beaver, Mark, the Northern Ireland accent has regularly been voted the sexiest in the UK. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
Or is that just me?
I can confirm from an academic perspective. So, yeah, there's lots of really interesting research on language attitudes. And I think it's really interesting for linguists like me because linguistically speaking, there's nothing inherently aesthetically pleasing or not pleasing in an accent. So we kind of expect, it makes sense that everyone has different opinions. We tend to feel fond of like accents similar to our own. But the fact that it tends to be quite consistent, that people will say they like certain accents and dislike others, is really interesting because that's something to do with like public perceptions of what people who have those accents are like, and maybe like what celebrities are famous at that time and who's sexy in the media and things like that. So yeah, it's a really fascinating area of linguistics.
And Hibernian English, says one of our texters, is far more colourful. For example, banjaxed. Would you agree with that? Or maybe it's just my accent. Maybe it is banjaxed.
What does that mean? I don't know that one.
Dear. Oh.
Aoife, what does banjaxed mean?
If your car's banjaxed, it's written off. It means like a whole wreck. Yeah.
That's a great word.
I didn't know that was a Northern Ireland term. We use it, and I suppose you don't realise sometimes that the funny terms you use are actually local ones. I did not realise banjaxed was not just something that people knew. And Dr. Rand, back to what we were talking about, this Twitter dispute between Alex Scott and Lord Digby. What have you made of it all?
I mean, to be honest, linguist Twitter is pretty unified on this. We're definitely on Alex's side. I suppose my main I had a whole load of objections to Lord Digby's tweet. But when he says, like, oh, it's nothing to do with class, it's just to do with elocution and pronunciation, like, those things are incredibly bound up together. When you criticise the way someone speaks, you are criticising at least an element of their identity. Like, it's never just about the language. And I think we've got this kind of misconception in society that language can be thought of as apolitical, that we can criticise someone's speech and we're just criticising their speech, we're not criticising them. But that isn't right at all. Those things are massively bound up together. And I don't think it makes sense to talk about, we just want to correct people's elocution. Like, no, you are attacking somebody's identity when you do that.
Well, our callers have been very shy about letting us hear their accents, but Anne in Newton Butler's going to risk it. Afternoon, Anne. Let's hear you.
I didn't want you to say where I was from. No, I wanted to say that the method of speaking I don't mind at all. Some of the accents are very nice, but I do object to the careless grammar of journalists. The word gone has vanished. It has went. Also, the seen and done it's been prominent for years, but I don't know where gone has went.
But does it matter if we still know what the reporter means? Who gives a monkey, some might say.
Well, it's very irritating.
Very irritating. Joan and Bangor, what do you think? Oh, Joan and Bangor thought about phoning in. She was on the line. Then we're told she will be on the line. She's here now. Hi, Joan.
I'm waving, yes. You want to talk to me?
You were waving on the radio from Bangor. My eyes are good. They're not that good. What about accents? What do you think, Joan?
Well, I'm not so concerned about accents. It's loveliness I'm concerned about. In high places, and people now with the texting all, they can't even spell or write a letter. I had occasion to correspond with my local council, and it came back in headed paper, and it was signed all the best. And I could not credit how standards have dropped. Official paper, somebody replying to you, and that's how they signed it, all the best.
What would you have preferred?
Well, you'd prefer your something or other, either truly or whatever. But all the best, I just couldn't credit it. So I thought standards in high places certainly are down the tube.
But Joan, does it really matter? You know what they meant, and maybe they were being familiar.
It did matter, because we're talking about education and kids not be able to get places at school and all the rest of it now. And really, it does not inspire confidence when somebody is slovenly and just doesn't take their time to do the correct thing.
And back to accents. Have you a favourite accent?
Well, I suppose our own's as good as any.
Would you agree it's the sexiest in the UK?
Certainly not.
Certainly not. Jonah Bagger, thank you.
Certainly not. My son-in-law is from the States and he has a gorgeous accent.
Well, is that the thing, Dr. Ryan? Do we tend to find other accents more attractive?
Oh, that's a really good question. And to be honest, I'm not sure. Like when you look at people's attitudes in research, sometimes we find that it's to do with like accents being exotic. And sometimes it's to do with accents that we find familiar. I mean, we're still working on it, to be honest. We're still doing that research and kind of trying to find out more about where those attitudes come from.
Aoife, have you got a favourite accent?
I actually lived in Scotland for years. I went to university there, so I quite like Scottish accents. I'm not just being biased now, but I actually do really like the West Coast of Scotland accent.
Felicity?
I think I might go for the West Country. I'm a devotee of Thomas Hardy, and when you read his stuff out loud, you actually get the accent, and I just love that sort of Bury thing. And it's one actually we hardly ever hear on the national radios or TV. It's Bath and further west, and it's partly because it's unusual. I think it's lovely and gentle and soft, and I would be rather fond of it.
And Felicity, as a tax specialist, would you have to admit that perhaps in something as bespoke as that, having a slightly posh, dare I say, accent has helped?
Do you think when I'm arguing with tax inspectors, they feel one down? Is that what you're trying to suggest, Mark? And I might want to use that. Unfortunately, most of the inspectors I deal with nowadays are in England, so the opportunity to perhaps intimidate, which I might just occasionally try, isn't so available to me. There are times when it's helpful, but you would be surprised how often, actually, the way I speak is a bit of a hindrance to me.
And Aoife, what about the Derry accent? When's it beneficial?
When's it beneficial? When you're talking to other Derry people? No, to be honest, a lot of the people I meet in Dublin especially will often, in real life, will often say, oh, I really like the Derry accent. And then when Derry Girls came out and, people were saying they really like the accent. So on the whole, people are generally quite nice. It's there is a certain section of people, the kind of Lord Digby-Joneses of the world, who when it comes to broadcast media, they do not want regional accents. But by and large, people are really nice. Even you'll know yourself as a northerner when you go away on holidays and you meet people from England or Scotland or whatever, they're always quite enamoured with our accents. But it's just a certain section of high society that thinks, certain people shouldn't be on the TV or radio.
Is it just me, or do I kind of tone down my accent a little bit so that they can understand me? Is that just me, Aoife?
I mean, when I'm talking to my mammy, I'm not talking the same as I do when I'm on the radio. You have to make sure that, people can understand you. It's not that I'm against, changing your accent a bit, because I do talk incredibly fast, and I make an effort when I'm on TV or whatever it is to slow down, because I know it's not that easy an accent. But I think completely changing your accent is a no-go, and I think it's bad for yourself. Well
said, Aoife Moore. We understood every word. Of course we did, and we understood every word from Felicity Huston and Dr. Sadie Ryan. Thanks for your company today. I'm back tomorrow. Thanks for listening. In the meantime, enjoy the rest of your Monday. Up next is the one and only, yes, Hugo Duncan is next.
Yes. Mark?